Greetings and welcome to Mediocre Minis. Here we have our second spooky season miniature. This is the Pumpkin Knight from Reaper Miniatures. Something interesting about this mini, I got this as part of the Bones 5 Kickstarter, as with a lot of Reaper minis that I own. But if you take a look on the website, this says it is a special edition Trick or Treat mini from ReaperCon 2016. Maybe there's some differences, maybe there's not. I'm not positive, but yeah, that's a little bit interesting from this mini and where it came from and what it really is. Anyway, as with the previous spooky season mini with the zombie, I gave the miniature a prime with dark neutral gray from Pro Acryl. I just love the color. I think it works out great, and this gives me a nice dark gray to work with as a base for everything that we'll be painting. So there's really only a few main areas that we're going to be base coating, and let's start off with the head, or in this case the pumpkin, which serves as his head. For the base coat, I used dark brown and orange into a mix. It came close to about a 50-50 mix or so, and I used that as my base coat. I wanted something a little bit darker and brown so I can highlight up, and I had a clever idea to do a little bit later on with the eyes, and starting dark and having a dark head would show off this effect a little bit more. In addition, I also gave the head a sepia wash, give it a little bit more of a brown, darken it down a little bit more, and to prepare for the highlighting process. And once that rebasing was complete, then I simply worked up from there using more and more orange into the mix, and then eventually a very tiny amount of off-white. I didn't really use that too much other than for the eyes. I filled in the eyes, nose, and mouth with the white and off-white to get that nice and bright for a little bit later on. After the eyes were dry, I kind of went very hard with the highlights around the eyes. I wanted them to be very sharp. I wanted them to stand out a lot, because what I was going to do next was thin down some yellow. I got it relatively thin so I could almost the consistency of a wash, and then I simply filled in the eyes, nose, and mouth with that yellow, and it kind of showed off these eyes almost if they were glowing or if they were shining in some way. And the hard highlights around the openings of, like I said, the eyes and the nose, with the yellow wash or the thin yellow over top of it, it really kind of stands out and really highlights those edges even more so. Pretty happy with how this turned out. It's not perfect, of course, but I think for something fun like this, it was a good idea, and it worked out pretty nicely. All right, excluding the armor, the largest area on this model is the cape, and since the head was going to be orange, since it's a pumpkin after all, I wanted to do a little bit of contrast with it, and decided to make the cape blue. Yeah, just a mixture of the blue and a small amount of black for the base coat for the cape, just to keep it a little bit darker so I can then use blue right out of the pot. Now, what I ended up doing from here is I kind of took a very long way around to get to where the cape ended up being. And what I mean by that is I did many layers of thinned down blue paint to kind of build up the highlights slowly. And it's great. I really enjoy doing that. For some reason, I've fallen in love with the call it glazing for miniatures and slowly building up thin layers to create highlights and shades. The problem is it takes forever. Again, normally I like that, but as part of spooky season and wanting to get these minis done, I realized I was going a little bit too slow. So I ended up just using blue straight out of the pot, with a little bit of thinning so it blended in relatively well, but not taking as much time to slowly build up the highlights. And then, of course, added in a little bit of off-white to that mix to make the highlights a little bit brighter on some of the highest edges, corners, and sharp bits that would reflect the most light. And finally, we have the armor. To start off, I base coated all of the armor, the weapons, the shield, everything in the silver that we have. Once the silver paint has dried, I then gave everything a wash with the black wash and let that set. It turned out pretty good. Once the wash all dried, I then just reestablished the silver again and highlighted effectively all the areas that I wanted to not be as dark. It worked out pretty well. Overall, a duller, not quite as shiny, a little bit worn silver armor, using only 2 paints, the silver and a wash, It worked out pretty well, at least for this. So I used the gold to go over many of the prominent areas, such as the hilt of the sword, the skull, and some of the other ornaments on the knight, and of course, the design on the shield. I think the little bit of gold definitely sets it off relatively nicely, and the gold also got a brown or sepia wash as well, which really kind of brought out this nice richness to it, and it kind of stands out great amongst the silver armor, the blue, and a little bit of orange. And finally, for the base, I kept this very simple. You'll notice that things become a little bit too simple on some of these miniatures, but I just gave it a base coat of gray, and then a sepia wash afterwards, plus a black base rim. Looking back on it now, I probably could have done a little bit more to it, but for now, that's what we got. And there we have it. The second miniature for spooky season is complete. The Pumpkin Knight, I kind of had a little bit of fun with, especially the pumpkin head. It's not too often I paint pumpkins or get to do these types of highlights, and that was a kind of a treat. That was nice to do. Maybe we'll see some more pumpkins coming up. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. This is Mediocre Minis, and may the divine light your path.